Hello, everyone. Welcome to our fourth Culture Days workshop. My name is Darlene McKee, and I am the Community Engagement Coordinator at the Southern Alberta Jubilee Auditorium, and we're so excited to see all of you today. Before we get started, I just wanted to let you know that if you have any questions for Darlene, please pop them into the chat on YouTube, and we will get them to Darlene when we have a chance at the end. Yeah, and that's all for me. Erin, I'm going to pass it on to you.
Great. Hello, everyone. Wherever this finds you on this bright sunny day, at least here where I am in Calgary. My name is Aaron Coates. My pronouns are he, him, and I am a facilitator at the Southern Alberta Jubilee Auditorium. I want to begin today with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that what we call Alberta is the traditional and ancestral territory of peoples residing in Treaty Regions 6, 7, and 8. We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who have lived in and cared for these lands for generations. We are grateful for the traditional knowledge keepers and elders who are still with us today and those who have gone before us. We make this acknowledgement as an act of reconciliation and gratitude to those whose territory we reside on or are visiting. Now, I am pleased to turn it over to my friend Darlene Auger, who is going to entertain and delight and amaze you over the next hour. So over to you, Darlene.
Wow, what a nice introduction. Thank you, Aaron. Okay. So today I'm happy to be here with you, and I'm going to be reading one of my books called Miigwech, which is the Cree word for the traditional teepee. All right, let's begin. Let me see, I'll make sure I've got my screen on properly here. Okay, I hope you can see. Uma ka pinitaugi oskiawase sotaski pimnihkwan uhte wawitna inihta pidine pihtsaik miigwechpik. When little ones are born onto the earth, they are slowly let down with a rope into the teepee. El guigwa bimnihkwan, piagwan ogawi mawa ta kutsiapi. The rope represents the spirit mother's umbilical cord. Eogo mitsiapi iapahtak kamamoa pihtamik miigwech pihtigwa. Igutohte watstun ihtagwan. This cord is the rope that ties all the teepee poles together. It creates a nest on the top of the teepee. Iguta watistuanik oskiawasis aiwipo. Igutohte mitsiapi nima pihtsaik miigwechpik taguhtimagan. The baby rests in that nest for a while until the cord finally makes its journey to the inside of the teepee. Mitsia piegua apatan, kausihta maht, pipisses oskiawasses wipson. Igutaigua aiwipu esko kaskihtaatse kapiago wiawip pimuhtahissot miguah pihkuhtse. The cord is then used to make a swing for the baby inside the teepee. Here the baby rests for a long while until he or she can walk out of the teepee on her own. Utaigua kawigu oskiawasis. This is the new home of the child. Eguhtse anitnapi kanihiosihkasot. Wia mitsiapi igi nicht ahtsahkuhkuhtse ino. Maga nochts anishnabe kisihkatano. That is why we call them anithnapi in Cree, meaning one who is let down by a rope or an umbilical cord. But today we call them Anishinaabe. Uma gigskehtamuin giskinahamagno dansise bematsun egwamigwa ewahkumagahkwao egwamina okawimao ochoasimsa. This teaching connects the teepee to the creation of life and the mother to the child. Kayas kiano ni hiawag miguahpeh kigihwigiach. A long time ago, Native people lived in teepees. Ikuspiitigui mana kagihpahpampitsiach. That was during the time when we moved around a lot. Negipihtin esku kamig miguah bisehatig. Wia iskwewak kagi kanawihta kwao kahkioki kway kwayas keguta. I've heard the teepee be referred to as the woman's lodge because it was the women who kept everything inside the teepee in order. Eoguaste igi kutawanihki to. And they kept the home fires burning. Iguah negihpihtin wiawaw squewag. Igi usihtato wasche. Igi piagutsimatato miguah. I've also heard that the women alone used to make the teepee and set it up. Wah. Tapuisa ikih maskawat stong ni hiyaw squewag. Oh, wow. Those Cree women sure were strong. Kiwapahtinsi, migwa, ewawiyag, utstawanma. Wiakiano nihiawag, ipimitsahamask, mamo gawimao, wiaswilna. Do you see that the teepee is round? This is the natural law or the law of creation. And as Native people, we follow these laws. Taskuts awakisagaw pisem, iguamina tipskaw pisem, wistawaw, iwawi suwag. The sun and the moon are round. Iguamina piesis, watston, wawiyayu. So is the bird's nest. Igomina minsa, wawiyawa. And berries are round. Igomina mistawaske, wawisu. And the drum is round. Igomina kahawawasut isku wawiyayu watai. And a woman's belly is round when she has a baby growing inside her. Igomina umaski. Kawigiyak wawiyaw. And this earth that we live on is round. Mi kwatsuma utaskik kawigiyak. Wiaswilna kmitsahino kwayask. Kapmitsay kamitsahamak niusap uhe uta wiaswilna. Piagwan niusap miguah pitawa. While we live here on the earth, there are certain laws that we live by. Here are 14 of those laws that are represented here by the 14 poles of the Cree teepee. The first one is Sagi to win, love. The second one, Witi to win, help one another. 3, Miyo Biginawa suwin, good child raising. 4, Sohki tamuin, strength. 5, Naneh tamuin, obedience. 6, Xte tamuin, respect. 7, Tapahtemuen. Humility. 8. Mewehtamuen. Happiness. 10. Oh, 9. Sorry. 9. Nanaskumuen. Thankfulness. No, you don't want to forget that one. 10. Pahwinamatuwin. Sharing. 11. Tapogehtamuin. Faith. 12. Wahkutuwin. Kinship or relatedness. 13. Aspemuin. Hope. And 14. Natamagiwin. Protection. Now, if you take the first syllabic or the first 2 letters of the first 4 laws, sagehtuwin, wetihtuwin, mio uhpigenhauswin, sohkehtamuin, the SAWEMI and SO spell sawemeso, which means bless yourself. And so, if you live by the first 4 laws of love, of helping one another, of raising good children, and strength, then you will have blessed yourself. Kap mitsahamak uhe wiasueona uma emio aisiniuya. Following these laws makes us good human beings. Kistatsi kahmiwihti niguahpek kawigin. Would you like to live in a teepee? The end. Ekuse.
That's such a beautiful story. Thank you, Darlene. There's already questions for you.
Great.
But I would like to hear a little bit about you, how you wrote these books, what they are, where they come from. Are you able to speak to that a bit?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. So, from 20, well, I guess for about the last 20 years, I've been learning from different elders and mentors who have really taken me under their wing and taught me many, many things about different teachings of our culture, of our Neheo Wewen culture. And this came about because I had a really powerful spiritual vision in the fall of 2001. 2001. So yes, 20 years ago, right around this time, actually. And what I saw in my vision was a very large swing, like a cradle, like a little hammock. And a grandmother, a very ancient grandmother spirit, spoke to me at the time. And she said, the people need to be swung. And that's all she said to me. And so I didn't really understand at the time what that meant, and or if I was to do anything about that. And so I started to ask for help from elders and different people that I knew to see if they might be able to help me understand more about this vision. And it happened a year later that I created a very large swing like the one I saw in the vision. And I started to swing people like the grandmother asked. And I've been doing that for the last 20 years. And it's been growing and growing and growing. And as a result of all of the teachings that I gathered, I went back to school. And I did my doctorate in Indigenous life knowledge at Blue Quills, at the Blue Quills University. And there I was really looking at this 20-year-long, research that I had done in learning about the swing. And in learning about the swing, I came to learn a lot more. I came to learn about our origin stories, one of which is here, is in this book, Megwa. And then the other books are about the swing and the moss bag and the belly button teachings. And all of these teachings are wrapped up in our philosophical, spiritual way of parenting children traditionally in our Nihio culture. And a lot of these traditions, practices, were lost during the time of residential school, that era, when children were removed from their homes and put into a residential school away from their home. And they were not allowed to speak their language or practice their culture. And so when these children then grew up and became adults and became parents, they did not have those teachings, those traditional teachings, and they did not have those practices for parenting. And so they did not know how to parent. And we are now experiencing the fallout of that whole era. And so I really, in writing my dissertation in my doctorate program, I decided that I really wanted to leave something behind for the children. I really wanted to teach the children, offer the children these teachings about traditional parenting philosophies and practices. And so I spoke to one elder specifically, and he said, feel free to do that if you're writing to children, if you're writing stories for children. And so that's what I did. And that's why I went ahead and wrote these little books, which have many, many, many teachings for children. And so that's kind of the long and short of it.
That's awesome. I will put the link where teachers can purchase these books? Because they also come, correct me if I'm wrong, with like a teacher resource as well, right? There's a learning guide.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, this is such a very wonderful way for me to complete my circle of parenting, because my 24-year-old daughter, who's now a teacher, actually helped me to develop the teacher's guide. So yeah, so the teacher's guide is part of the books, and there's also an audio that comes with it where I'm reading the books in Cree and in English. So you'll notice that all the books come in the language, which is the Cree language, the syllabics we call them.
Mm-hmm.
And then also in Cree, Roman orthography it's called, and then in English. So, students can follow along in Cree. They can eventually, learn to read the book in Cree and learn a lot of Cree words in the process. So.
Thank you. Okay, are you ready for the student questions? Because there's a lot of them. The first question, I'm just going to zoom over to YouTube, so I'm reading it exactly from here. Oh, there's even more than the last time I checked. Ms. Tang's class says, one of my students would like to hear the story behind your earrings. Thanks, Darlene.
The story behind
your earrings that you're wearing right now.
Earrings. Oh my gosh. Okay. So, the earrings are like a star, as you can see. And this is very interesting. This is a very interesting question, actually.
Amazing.
We have star teachings. And this is actually going to be in my next series of books. Should I make you wait for the book to come out?
Give us a teaser, Darlene.
Okay. So what we believe is that we came from the stars. So we believe that, every person that's here on this earth came from the stars. So, and of course, if you looked at Earth from another planet, then Earth would just look like a star. So we are all star beings. And so in our teachings of being star beings, currently, one of the things that gives us a clue is that on the top of our heads, all of us, of course, we can't see it right now, and we can't ever really see it unless we, cut open our scalp, which we wouldn't want to do. But in our skull, we all have a little tiny star. We are born with it. And this tells us that we are star beings. We are from that nation of the Star Nation. And when we're babies, it's quite noticeable. And this is what is called our spiritual doorway. So when our spirit leaves our body, our spirit leaves from that doorway. So from that little tiny opening that's shaped like a star. And now as we get older, the little opening starts to look more like a triangle. And this is also still considered a spiritual doorway. So there's your little hint.
That's amazing. That's
Thank
a really cool story
question.
to have. Yeah, what a great way to kick it off. Okay. Oh man, there's more. Okay. Ms. Tang's class also wants to know, how did you learn your language?
I wonder if I can just say that I was born with it. I know that probably doesn't make a lot of sense, but because when I was in my mommy's tummy before I was born, that would have been the language that I heard all the time spoken in my home. My mom and dad would have been speaking it to each other. And so when I was born, I was already familiar with those sounds the sounds of the words and the sounds and the rhythms of the language. And so as a baby, it was the only language that my mom and dad spoke. And then so because I'm a middle child, I'm one of the middle children, there's 8 of us children in my home. My older brothers and sisters would have already been speaking the language to me. And so it just was a very natural learning for me. Yeah, it wasn't hard to learn. English, on the other hand, was kind of hard for me to learn. I did not speak English fluently until I was about 9 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. So English is my second language.
Okay. Ms. Del Fabro's class asks, who did you learn all of your teachings from?
Okay, well, like I said, there was a number of teachers over the 20 years that I gathered these teachings. This particular book that I just read to you, some of the teachings, and you know what? If you do have the books, you will, all the teachers, I thank them. I thank all, and I acknowledge all my teachers in the back of the book. So in this book, I thank Jimmy O'Cheese, who taught me the story of the Anishinaabe, how, the Anishinaabe, they were let down, and the story is the original story. I don't write it exactly as as they are told to me, just out of respect, for the traditional oral storytelling. So I write a piece of it, and then you'd have to go to that elder, to sit with that elder and find those other pieces. But the story, when Jimmy O'Cheese told us the story, he talks about the grandmother spider woman. So grandmother spider woman up in Star Nation weaved her silks into a braid like a rope, and that's what she used to let down the first man into the teepee. And so that's the story that Jimmy O'Cheese shared. And so in my story here, I begin just by saying the man was let down by a rope, right? So that's what I'm talking about. And so Jimmy O'Cheese, and then there was also teachings from Elder Mary Lee. And Elder Mary Lee is from the Cree tribe out in Manitoba. And she has teachings. Actually, you can Google her because she has lots of teachings on the internet on the teepee. And again, she shares teachings of each of the poles, what they mean. And again, it's about parenting. But what I did was I didn't use her like actual teachings. What I did was I took the laws that were taught to us by Carl Quinn, Elder Carl Quinn, while I was in my doctorate program. He came and he taught us 36 of the 44 laws of the Cree laws. And so I used 14 of those laws to represent the 14 teepee poles. Yeah. So, I mean, there's so many different elements. Just for this book, those were the 3 significant teachers. Yeah.
Okay. There are many questions about the drums on your wall. So they want to know, how many drums do you have? What are those drums made out of? Or is there a story behind them? Who made them? Do you play them? Those are all the questions.
Okay, so this particular drum here was not a drum that I made. I have made a drum, and the teaching about the drums that we make is that the first one that we make has to be given away. So we have this teaching in all of our, how can I say this? In everything that we make, or build, we must give away the first one. And that's for respect, for reciprocity. So when you give, it will be returned to you. Everything that you give will be returned to you. And so you must give in order to receive. And so it's that kind of law. And so I've given my drum away, the one that I made. And so I don't have that one, but this one here was given to me. And this one here is made from elk. It's made from elk hide, so it's very, very thick rawhide. So, when you see an elk, so when that elk is no longer alive, of course, then you stretch the fur of the elk onto a frame, and then you scrape off all the hair off the elk. And then what you have left is this raw hide, and you dry it, or first you wet it. And the way we did it traditionally, at least when we did moose hides, we would put the moose's brain into the water, into some warm water, with some soap, and we would mix that up, and then we would put the raw hide in this mixture, and that softens it. That softens the raw hide. So then you'd leave it in there, say overnight, and then you'd hang it up, you'd stretch it again, and you'd hang it up. And then you would, as it's starting to dry, you would keep stretching it over a fire. And it's just the smoke that you want. And it's the smoke that creates the color. So the color, it depends on the color you want. The color of your drum could be darker or lighter. This color here of my stick, this is like moose hide, right? And so you see the color is sort of the same color as my drum, but maybe a little bit more beige, and so that color comes from being smoked. So yeah. We call it smoking the hide. And so that's what makes the color. And then when you stretch it onto this circular frame, so these circular frames, come from steaming and bending the wood. So it's a process that takes a bit of time to do. And so you need to use a wood that's really bendable, like willow. Willow is good. And it's very flexible. And then you create this circular frame. And then you just place your hide over that frame and you tie it into place. So you can see the ties, on the drum. And then you just sew the sinew. So what we use here, this string that you see, is the sinew, again, from the animal. So sinew is made from the tendons of the animal. So everything in the drum is found in nature and very simple to make. And then the sound, so right now, because it's been hanging on my wall, it sounds quite, low, But if I were to put it, on a fire and warm it up, as it gets warm, the sound gets higher and higher. Yeah, so that's the story of this drum.
And then above where that drum was hanging, there's some questions about what is that piece of art? What does it represent? Is there a story behind it? They really like your whole setup here. Yeah, that one. Yeah.
That is part of the Mayan culture. So that's a Mayan astrology chart. So it tells of when a person was born, what I guess time they were born in, what that time specifically means for them to be born in that time. And for example, my birthday, the day that I was born, ends up in this period of time here. And so I would have to go to a Mayan elder to learn about that, to learn about what was happening in the time that I was born and what does that mean for me as a person living in this day and age. So that's what that is. It's a Mayan astrology chart. Yeah.
Okay, a grade 5 student is asking, were your parents residential school survivors?
Yes. My parents, sadly, unfortunately, were in residential school. And yes, thankfully they did survive that, awful time in our history. My dad was there longer than my mom. My dad was there for 6 years until he got very sick and he had to be hospitalized. And he was actually hospitalized here in Edmonton at a hospital called Eberhard Hospital. It's an old hospital. And not sure if the building is still there. It might be. Anyways, he had acquired TB, tuberculosis. So he had to be hospitalized for a lot of years after that when he was still quite young. And my mom, she was in residential school for about 3 years. And what really saved my mom from, the abuses that were suffered there by other children was that my grandmother, after my grandmother had, been in school there, she chose to, when my mom became of that age that she had to go to school, my grandmother took a job at the residential school kitchen, as a kitchen helper, and she protected my mom. So she basically kept my mom beside her, most of the time while she worked there. Yeah. So my mom was able to maintain the language and then, pass it on to me and my siblings. So we're pretty fortunate.
Thank you for answering that. One of the questions is, how do you say hello in Cree?
We don't actually have a word for hello. We have a word that says, hello, how are you? So we said it's dance. Dance. Can you say it? Dance. Dance. Yeah, that says, hi, how are you? Yeah, it's kind of all encompassing.
I wish we could hear you all practicing.
Yeah.
There's a question, where were you born and where do you live now?
What a great question. This is where I should have began. My great grandmother had settled came from out east. So on my mother's side, my great grandmother apparently came from out east by horses. on horses. And there was a group of them that settled in Calling Lake, Alberta. And then, so that's where my grandmother was born. And then she moved to Wabasca, Desmarais. And that's where I was born. That's where my mom was born, and that's where I was born. And on my father's side, my great grandfather, like dating back to the 1600s, I had a French grandfather or great grandfather, and he was an Auger from northern France. And so because over time through colonization, even though I should have taken my mother's name because we were matriarchal societies before colonization, and what that means is that we would take our mother's, our mother's name and our mother's clan, not our father's. So, but because of colonization, I ended up having to take my father's name, which is my great grandfather's name from northern France. And so when I went to France last year, or a few years ago before COVID hit, I learned that I have relatives over there.
Oh my gosh.
Side. So,
cool.
Yeah, so there's still lots of Augers apparently in northern France, which is very interesting. But my father's mother was full Cree, and she was from Wabasca, Desmarais. Yeah.
And where do you live now?
And now I live in Edmonton. I live in Edmonton, Alberta. Yeah.
Thank you. There's a question that says, we noticed that the women made the teepees. Why did the women make the teepees and not the men?
So one of the teachings about the teepee is that it's considered a woman's lodge. So, and I'm sure this again has to do with our societies being matriarchal. And so the home belonged to the women and the children, and the elderly. But the lodge would belong to the woman, which means that she would build it, and she would make the fire inside the lodge, and she would raise her children inside the lodge. And so the teepee, the way it's made, is like a woman's skirt, right? So if you think about how the teepee looks, it actually looks like a woman with a skirt, wearing a skirt, and she's raising her hands up to Creator. So that's how the teepee looks, see?
Oh my goodness, yeah.
It looks like a dress, like a woman's dress. So, it also represents the womb of the woman, because that's where, again, she raises her children. And so we have a lot of ceremonies for little ones, when they first arrive. And one of them is called a walking out ceremony. And the walking out ceremony happens when that little baby, remember in the story, there's a nest created here when the baby first is let down by that rope, and the baby comes to rest in this nest, right? Mm-hmm. And then the baby gets let down. The rope, gets let down further and now into the inside of the teepee, and then the swing is made for that baby with that same cord, that umbilical cord of that grandmother spider. And then that cord is let down further, and it's connected to the tiny little belly button of the baby. And it's not until the baby can walk on its own 2 feet by herself, that she or he can walk out of the teepee. So in that basically the first year of life of the child, the baby is in that teepee. So it's kind of like the second womb, And so it's not until they are independently walking on their own that they can actually leave that teepee. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, I think we have time for 2, maybe 3 more questions.
Okay.
What is your favorite Cree food?
Food.
Your favorite Cree food, they're asking. But I mean, any food would be good too.
Fried moose meat.
Oh.
Fried moose meat with onions and mushrooms. That's my favorite of all time.
And how would that be cooked? Like if you could cook it the best way, what would that be?
Well, if you think about how fried, how you fry beef, it's cut into tiny little strips, like if you think about the way Chinese do beef and greens, Yeah.
Yeah.
So we would cut it the same way, like really thin layers of strips of moose meat. And then we would put some grease into the pan, oil, and then, just have the pan simmer a little bit and then put the meat in there, and it takes just minutes, it just takes minutes to cook, and you flip it over once, and then, and the meat is all ready. And that's the way I do it. And then I put a little tiny bit of water, to create some bubbling of the oil, and then I put some mushrooms in there and onions, and voila, it's done like within minutes, and I love it.
Yum yum.
I love that there's now a recipe attached to this workshop today.
Yeah.
To hear if anyone makes this.
Yeah.
Who illustrated the book?
Oh, geez, I'm so sorry that I didn't tell you that. So this is illustrated by Chloe Bluebird Mustush. And this is a young woman that I was so happy to find, because at the time when she did this, she was only 20 years old, 20 or 21. And she had just graduated from art school. And this was her first assignment, and she did an amazing job. I'm so proud of her. So she's a young Cree girl from Alexander Reserve. So not very far from Edmonton. Yeah.
There's a couple more questions that I might just email you, because I feel like they're going to have long answers. But one of the best questions that came in, they're all beautiful, but this one I think is awesome, is let me read it verbatim. I don't want to paraphrase. Okay. Darlene, do your neighbors know that you are an awesome, amazing author? They don't know? You got to tell them, man.
Okay, one of my neighbors know, because they have a little girl, and I gifted that little girl with the CD of Cree lullabies. Oh, I forgot to tell you. In the package, if you order it as a package, you get the 4 books, the teacher's guide, the audio of me reading in Cree and English, and a CD of Cree lullabies. So
that's amazing. I
gifted their little girl with the Cree lullaby CD, and they loved it. And so then I shared with them that I have this whole kit, and I showed them the books. So they know. My neighbors on one side know, but not on the other side.
I just put a link into the chat that will direct teachers to where they can find your books. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. For those of you who don't know, Darlene did one of these story times already earlier for National Indigenous History Month. And so we have a video on our YouTube of Darlene sharing her book, My Belly Button, with us. So if you enjoyed today, I highly recommend popping over to that video and checking it out. Darlene, thank you so much for your time. I love getting to share your stories. I hope we can do it again soon. Everyone else, thank you for joining us. Feel free to send us an email if you have any photos or questions for Darlene. You can email us and I'll make sure she gets them. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.